Let's go ahead and get started on our action-packed, very exciting day in the Commerce Committee. First, are there any bill introductions? Representative Titus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'd like to request the introduction of RS 2490, dealing with child care licensing inspectors and accountability of inspections with the Department of Health and Environment.
Seeing no objections, we'll accept that bill. In committee, I have been informed that it looks like the child daycare type bills are all going to come to Commerce, and so that's why he's introducing it here. So it's going to be an exciting year. Mark 2, you need to tell us who you're with and what the bill RS number is and what it is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mark Toom. I'm with the Kansas Association of Realtors and like to introduce RS 2392. This provides the Kansas Real Estate Commission with additional tools to protect consumers and also prohibits the dealing in assignable contracts.
Okay, seeing no objection, we'll accept the bill.
Thank you.
Rachel Willis, Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Rachel Willis, Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Commerce. I have two today. RS 2417 deals with EV and hydrogen. And then the other one is RS 2403, which is the Tourism Cleanup Bill.
Seeing no objection, we'll accept both bills. Thank you very much. Are there any other bill introductions? Okay, seeing none. We'll move along. First up, we have a presentation on KU Cancer Center, and we'll start with Chancellor Gerard. Welcome to Commerce Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Thank you for allowing us to join you today and give an update on the KU Cancer Center and talk a little bit about a request that we have before the legislature this year as well related to that. I do not have a bill to introduce, so simplify your life a little bit there. If we could start the slides, that would be great. Yes, this one. Thank you. If you could go forward 2 slides. There you go. So just a little bit about KU Cancer Center as it exists today, and I'll talk a little bit about the history of it, but we are the only NCI comprehensively designated cancer center in our region. Only about 1% of cancer centers ever reach this level of designation, and we're one of about 56 in the United States. What makes up our cancer center is really about 350 researchers and clinicians who focus exclusively in cancer. And in fact, on the clinical side, we have 150 physicians who are disease specific. And what that means is they have a very narrow area of focus. And so we have a surgeon, a radiation oncologist, and a medical oncologist, each who do nothing but breast cancer as an example. And so it allows them to develop a very deep level of expertise, but also stay on the forefront of what it is that they're doing for therapies, and then to collaborate very closely with our researchers to move on to new treatments and cures. We have about 13 sites across the metropolitan area, but if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we also have connections really across the entire state of Kansas. Our Masonic Cancer Alliance is a grouping, as you see those partners on this slide, that allows us to provide clinical trials and our cancer centers directed care at these sites across the state, so people do not have to travel necessarily all the way to Kansas City to get that. As part of our consortium, which is the designated part of that, we have partners with Children's Mercy Hospital to bring the pediatric element of cancer into it, and then the Stowers Institute of Research, which is one of the preeminent research institutes in the United States and located in the Kansas City metropolitan area. So our catchment area is actually not defined by us; it's defined by the National Cancer Institute, and that includes the entire state of Kansas and the western part of Missouri. If we could go to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So when we think about what this is as an asset to the state of Kansas, as I mentioned, it's really that preeminent cancer center that brings the best possible patient care and the latest possible treatments. And we know that this actually translates to a 25% higher survival rate for your cancer treatment if you are treated at one of these cancer centers. And that has a lot to do with the depth, expertise, and the cutting edge therapies that we can do. And it really also has, just beyond the patient care side of that, a tremendous economic benefit as well. If you could go to the next slide. This has been quite a journey for us. We really started this journey in 2004 when we hired Dr. Roy Jensen to head the Cancer Center. Roy is a Kansan, grew up in Gardner, Kansas, but went off to Vanderbilt for most of his career, and we recruited him back to lead the charge for us in 2004. And the state's been a great partner throughout this process. Started in 2008 with a $5 million per year allocation to help support the infrastructure of the Cancer Center. And a few years ago, that was increased to $10 million as we were going for our comprehensive status. And it's really been a wonderful partnership. We've had 5 governors through the course of this period of time. Obviously, many legislators have participated. The greater community, the Kansas Masonic Foundation has been there since the start. And really, Johnson County, through the JSER tax, has been very supportive of the clinical trials unit in Fairway. And our federal delegation has been incredibly supportive of bringing federal dollars to the table to support this initiative and to support our efforts for a comprehensive designation. And then the philanthropic community has been absolutely amazing as we've been on this journey. If you go to the next slide, we can really talk a little bit about the economic benefits. We can talk about the health benefits, but if you talk about the economic benefits, the Cancer Center itself, separate from the rest of the university, brings in over $50 million a year in research funding. That has totaled over $500 million over the last 10 or 12 years, which has really been on an incredible growth rate of over 58% since 2015. And those research dollars, obviously, that research produces new discoveries, new trials, new drugs, but it's conducted by extremely talented people that we recruit from really around the country. And you're going to hear from Dr. Chin in just a moment, who's one of those people that we were able to recruit back to Kansas. He is a native Kansan, but again, spent most of his career on the East Coast before coming back and joining us here in Kansas. And the goal of the Cancer Center is also to make it so nobody needs to leave the state of Kansas to get their cancer care. That anything that you can get at any cancer center, designated cancer center in America, you can receive right here in our region and really reduce the burden on patients and their families. But we also actually now provide care to patients from all 50 states and 30 countries come to our facility for care in particular areas. It also, having this status has really helped us recruit the best and the brightest, both clinicians and researchers, to help advance our efforts here. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that as well. But overall, the economic impact of the Cancer Center since 2007, it's been over $2.5 billion to our state. So has great economic benefits beyond the return on investment for our patients and our family members. Next slide, please, if you would. One of the reasons we are continuing to push on this, next slide if you would, is that this is a problem that is actually getting worse, not better. Today, 3 out of every 10 patients diagnosed with cancer will die from that cancer. And that's not great. That's 30% that we are not succeeding to help them beat this disease. Now, we have made progress. If you go back 30 years, it was 5 out of 10. So we have made some progress. We clearly have quite a ways to go. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that actually what we're looking at is, as Dr. Jensen would say, a tsunami of cancer cases coming our direction. And that has a lot to do with our demographics. So 1 in every 2 men in this room is going to have cancer, and 1 in 3 women in this room are going to have cancer in their lifetime. And we know that cancer, the incidence of cancer increases with age, and we know that our society is aging. So over the next few decades, we will go from having 48 million Americans over 65 to 88 million Americans over the age of 65. So with that, it's going to become a tremendous increase in cancer in our society for us to deal with. So that really leads us to the future vision, if we could do the next slide, of where we're headed with the Cancer Center, and go on to the next slide. Thank you. of really what we need to do differently, knowing where we're headed into the future, which is we need to really think differently about how we address cancer. We need to redefine the way we prevent cancer. Prevention is obviously the best thing, and certainly the most successful thing from a cure standpoint, just never get cancer. So we've got a lot of work to do there, but also how we diagnose at earlier stages so we're more effective, and then how we continue to develop new treatments. And to do that, we really need to translate our research and our discoveries in a more rapid fashion into the clinic so that we can get them out of the lab and into the therapeutic modalities for our patients. And we do a pretty good job of that right now, but we need to be more efficient and more effective at doing that. And then we really need to advance down the line of what is called precision medicine, which is identifying your own genetic characteristics and matching that up with those of the cancer that you have, and then designing specific treatments just for you, not the same treatment for 100 people that's going to work for 70% of them. And that's really the next wave of cancer care that we're pushing on. So to accomplish these things, this is where the ask is before the legislature. There's currently an ask in the governor's budget of $75 million to support this facility. That ask is actually a match ask. We had the philanthropic community come together and put together $75 million and to say if the state will match us, we'll provide $75 million. We started this initiative with a $100 million gift, largest gift in the state of Kansas, to start this initiative from the Sunderland Foundation. So we have great momentum on this. The federal delegation has been very supportive of it. And our ask to you all is to match the philanthropic community with that $75 million. The project that we're working on will bring our cancer providers and our researchers from 12 different locations together into one facility. And that does a number of things. It allows us to grow, which is key because we are out of space, both for clinical care and for research. But it also allows our researchers and our clinicians to co-locate next to each other to facilitate that collaboration and the speed with which we can get those discoveries into the patient environment. And that facility, all told, will be close to $600 million. So what we're asking for is a $75 million investment in a facility that'll bring a $600 million asset to the state of Kansas, an asset that really will benefit the entire state, the entire region, our catchment area, as we've talked about it. If you can go to the next slide. Just again, this is just talks about that co-location piece of how important it is for our researchers to be talking to the problems that our clinicians are seeing in the clinic so they can come back and help solve those problems. And through this facility, we know that we can really move the needle on that. I have a number of folks from our cancer center with us here today. Today was Cancer Day in the State House. So you may have noticed down on the second floor, we had a lot of folks down there, including doing some cancer screenings down there. Hopefully you had a chance to take advantage of that, but I can't thank them enough. This is incredible work that they do each and every day. We also have CC Rojas, one of our patients, who's one of our civic leaders from the Kansas City area, who went through recent treatment through the KU Cancer Center on some cutting-edge therapy available at very few places in the world, actually. And Cece was one of the originals going through that. Would you stand up, Cece? Thank you for being here to support our effort and for your bravery in going through your therapy. You can read a little bit more about Cece in your packet as well. A little bit of her story is there, which is really pretty remarkable. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for some questions before I pass the podium to Dr. Chin.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here, Dr. Gerard. One question that came to my mind while you were talking about the tsunami of cancer. I understand that there's obviously a function of age, but is it really narrowed down to just that? In other words, in other developed countries with similar life expectancies, are we seeing the same tsunami occur there at the same rate?
Great questions. The answer is yes, in terms of our entire world population is aging as well. But as you're going to hear from Dr. Chin, there are actually other comorbidities that are very relevant to this conversation that we do have an opportunity to work on the prevention side. And that's probably, quite honestly, our best option is to try and prevent as many of these things as we can rather than waiting for them to show up in our clinics. So you're going to hear just a little bit more about that. Great questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, he's not that kind of a doctor.
I'm a cancer doctor. I'm a legitimate cancer doctor. Come on now. Or at least I used to be.
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Doc, for being so gracious with your time here today, and thank you for the presentation. The 75 million that you said that you're trying to get the matching funds for, about how much of that would you say is IT related as far as modernization for that new co-located facility? I would imagine that there's an intent to be on the forefront of tech
Absolutely.
modernization and how it assists you in the cancer treatment, research, and the entire lab work. Can you explain that a little bit more to us?
The construction project of itself, which will house both our research and our clinical piece, is largely what this will go to. To your point, we, through Senator Moran, received $43 million for technology inside of this facility from the federal government, which is just one area that we're going to continue to invest in. That's in both imaging as well as treatment, all of which are changing very quickly. We did install just about 3 or 4 years ago, Ron, our proton therapy unit, which is we would love to give you a tour. It's a sight to see. It's a 75-ton object that generates the proton therapy and requires an entire building for it. But it is absolutely the cutting edge. And so it's continuing to your point, to invest in those things will keep us on the forefront as they come along.
Representative Dodson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Chancellor, for being here. My question has to do with maybe this cancer treatment and research as a system. And I guess yours will look something like maybe an MD Anderson or something like that. But do we have to have clinics scattered around the state of Kansas in a supporting role? And how do you see that developing?
Absolutely, and that's part of the network that we've been developing. The ideal is getting as much care as you can close to home, because as we know, going through cancer therapy is a very trying thing, and to have your family support systems around you are really important. So that's true on the diagnosis side. That's also true on the treatment side. So working with those partners out across the state to be able to deliver as much of that as we can, and we have a lot of opportunity to continue to grow that. That we can help make diagnoses, help make some plans, and then to the degree we can, make sure they get home and get those therapies closer to home. We can't do it all in Kansas City, and we shouldn't do it all in Kansas City. We really need to be out where the patients are.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so I'm not seeing any other questions. I would tell you, though, that about 20 years ago, my father was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of cancer, and our family moved to Houston while he went through treatment down there at the MD Anderson Clinic. And it was incredible to see the amount of people that are around there just to at the jobs and the commerce that it creates. And I'm very excited that we're taking the initiative to build the same type of thing here in the state of Kansas. It'll keep our sick people home, our loved ones home, and it will bring other people. This is an economic development deal, I'm telling you for sure. So I'll do everything I can to support this, sir.
Appreciate that. And I stand here as the chancellor of KU, but we're really talking about a state asset. I mean, we house it, we staff it because that's who we are, but this is really something for all of us.
I did have one other question. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here.
You never do that, sir.
During the State of the State speech, the governor made a statement in jest to our majority leader about the University of Central Florida being beat by KU basketball team. And she, in a sense, jinxed the game, and KU ended up losing. So do you have anything you'd like to say about that to the governor?
We had to eat a little crow on that one. It's much
right.
to Senator Cross benefit.
Seeing no further questions, we reserve the right to ask some later, though.
Absolutely. Right. And I have more talent behind me. Up next is going to be Dr. Ron Chin. And Ron, as he'll tell you, is a Topeka native. Grew up right here in Kansas, went to KU undergrad, but then moved on to Harvard for his medical education, and then really stayed on the East Coast for his entire career as one of the preeminent leaders in population health and radiation oncology. And without having this cancer center, we would have never gotten him back to the state of Kansas, where he is now our chair of radiation oncology. So it's my pleasure to welcome Ron Chin to the podium.
Welcome to Commerce, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you, Chancellor Gerard. Can I have my slides, please? So as Chancellor Gerard said, I grew up in Topeka, went to high school here, and then graduated from KU. Came back 5 years ago because I believe in the mission of our cancer center. Next slide, please. And all of us, under the leadership of Dr. Roy Jensen, our cancer center director, we work under the overarching goal to reduce the burden of cancer in Kansas for Kansas, and I came back to contribute to this goal. There's a lot of activities to share with you. I only have a few minutes, but I want to say that we do this systematically by monitoring data across our state to look at cancer incidence, mortality, and look for opportunities where we can make an impact. And in order to make an impact throughout the state, we collaborate with communities throughout Kansas to develop programs and then provide these programs and then monitor if we're making a difference. Next slide, please. So part of the data that we look at every year in the Cancer Center is we partner with the KDHE and the State Cancer Registry to look at what the top cancers are in the state of Kansas. So what you see here is a list of the top 10 cancers for men and women in our state. Incidence is the cases that are diagnosed. And so you can see that for men, and these are numbers out of 100,000 population, but for men, the top cancers diagnosed in Kansas are prostate, lung, colorectal, bladder, melanoma. And for women, it's breast, lung, colorectal, uterine melanoma. That's not the surprising part. The surprising part are the numbers that are bolded in red. We have several cancers in the state of Kansas where the incidence is higher than the US average. We don't know why we have more of these cancers than the rest of the US, but there's a lot of research ongoing to see why that's happening. And mortality are the cancers that cause the most deaths in our state. And again, these numbers are the numbers that we look at every year to look for opportunities for research and outreach and prevention so we can make an impact in our state. Next slide, please. Talking about prevention, these are the other data that we monitor. So we know that smoking is one of the biggest causes of cancer, and we monitor the smoking rates in the state of Kansas in different populations. So we have different subgroups by race, ethnicity, and we also really care about the rural population to see if there's an impact that we can make there. So you see the smoking rates that we have in Kansas compared to the US average, which is 16%. And we see opportunities to reduce smoking in some of the populations in Kansas. The next group is obesity. Obesity is linked to 13 cancers. In the next decade or two, will overtake smoking as the #1 cause of cancer in the US. We have opportunities to work on healthy living, diet, and exercise to reduce obesity in our state. And then the third group of bars there relate to cancer screening. Cancer screening for multiple cancers is a way for us to diagnose cancer as early as possible when they're most curable. I'm showing the numbers here for colorectal cancer screening. The US average is 70%. In our state, we have some opportunities to do more screening for colorectal cancer. Next slide, please. This is just a map showing the collaborations we have from the KU Cancer Center with individuals and communities throughout the state of Kansas. So we can work together, look at some of these data, develop programs so we can make an impact. Next slide, please. Just a couple of examples of some of the activities that we take. Every year, people from the Cancer Center drive across Kansas to have listening sessions in different communities. In 2023, we drove to Great Bend, Manhattan, Ellsworth, and we just had coffee. People came, and we had a conversation about what the needs are in the community and what people had concerns about related to cancer. We've also been to Pittsburgh, Wichita, and we continue to do this every year throughout the state. We also started giving community grants where community agencies throughout the state tell us, we have a need here, we have a program. Can you help fund some of these programs? And I'm giving some examples here of some of the grants that we funded. We funded a grant in Southeast Kansas in Pittsburgh to increase lung cancer screening in that community. We funded a grant in Johnson County Mental Health Center because they told us that individuals with mental health diagnoses often forget about cancer screening and we need to do more for them. So we funded that grant. We funded a grant in Hayes where they wanted to develop an education program to stop middle school students from starting to vape. We funded a grant in Kansas City for prostate cancer education. And Gilda's Club is a group that has a cancer survivorship program that helps patients come off of treatment and transition back to normalcy. If the education program focused on mental health, healthy living, diet, exercise, and they wanted to expand this program to multiple areas of the state, including Topeka, Lawrence, Pittsburgh, Salina, Hayes, Coffeyville, and we funded that program so we can increase access to that program for people in the state. Next slide, please. Another thing where we can make an impact is to increase access to clinical trials for patients across our state. Clinical trials in cancer often allows patients to access the latest treatments in cancer that's not yet available to the public. Most people cannot drive to Kansas City to see the doctors at KU Cancer Center to have access to clinical trials. So we partner with these centers throughout the state so patients can stay closer to home, enroll on clinical trials, get treated closer to home, but have access to KU clinical trials. So these are the partnerships that we make throughout the state of Kansas to try to increase this access. And this is such a successful program. We are teaching other NCI cancer centers how to develop this kind of network to increase access. Next slide, please. This slide is very busy, but shows some of the activities that we have at KU Cancer Center and the impact across the state. Cancer screening is so important. We bring cancer screening to the individuals so they don't necessarily go to their doctor for cancer screening. In the last 6 years or so, free cancer screening throughout the state from the KU Cancer Center has impacted 90% of counties and 7,600 individuals. We had a screening downstairs today, and this is something that will continue to happen. We have a cool program where we send staff to swimming pools throughout the state to do sun safety education about cancer prevention. Melanoma is one of the big cancers in the state, and that's one of the programs that we offer. We work with local cancer programs to provide continuing education to the physicians, nurse, social workers, staff, financial counselors, and we do that free to these programs. And we do a community needs survey every 5 years, and we send surveys to a random sample of individuals asking about the needs that they have and needs that they see related to cancer. And we have an education program called Bench to Bedside where Dr. Jensen, our cancer director, on a weekly basis will talk about a particular topic related to cancer. Diagnosis, prevention, research, clinical trials. And that's free for people to be able to watch and listen on podcasts. And that has reached over 250,000 people. Next slide, please. And with all of these activities, we'll continue to monitor if we're making an impact. Impact sometimes is hard to measure and takes a little bit of time, but we've been able to show that through our work, we've been able to reduce smoking in Kansas, increase HPV vaccination, which prevents multiple cancers. We're able to increase colon cancer screening in Kansas. We've also been able to show that in breast and lung cancer, we're able to bring the diagnosis earlier for the state of Kansas. And all of these sorts of impact will save lives for Kansans. Thank you very much.
Committee, any questions? Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. It's always great seeing another Asian American in this building. It's actually shockingly rare to be speaking to another Asian American here. Actually, to that end, though, on the modifiable risk factors slide, Asian Americans are not included in there. Is there a particular reason why?
That's a very good question. I'll answer that in two ways. One is that for groups of individuals where the numbers are small, there's privacy concerns related to sharing data. So oftentimes we have to suppress data when the cases are few and we're not able to show that in public. But the other side to that is we are working very closely, continue our collaboration with KDHE to try to increase our access to data. And so Asian Americans, we would love to have more data to measure the incidence mortality, American Indians too, but sometimes we don't have all the access data that we would like.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here, Dr. Chen. One of the slides caused me a little bit of an eyebrow twitch there. When we were talking about the incidences of cancer, male, female, at the very bottom it said age-adjusted data. No, what age adjustment takes place on that?
Yeah, so that's sort of a lot of epidemiology gobbledygook, but what on the bottom it says age-adjusted and per 100,000. That's the way this type of data is presented so that it can comparing state to state. And so we know that for states that have older population, they're naturally going to have more cases of cancer. And so some states are older, some states are younger. So we have to adjust for some of those confounding factors so then the rates are comparable across states. So we adjust for the age of our state compared to Missouri, compared to Nebraska, compared to New York, and that's how the data are presented.
Well, where do we, just out of curiosity, where do we rank in that? Are we older or younger than Missouri?
I don't know the answer to that, actually, but we're better.
Oh, that's definitely true. That's definitely true. I was just curious. Whenever we start adjusting out, the numbers like that, I'd really like to see a little bit more detail in there, or else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to have a more conversation with you and sort of talk to you about adjustment, how that works. But
That would be awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Penn.
We're better than Missouri. You go, Dr. Chen. I love it. Hey, thank you so much for being here today. And I just want to give you a lot of accolade for the deep competency that you have in your field. That speaks volumes of you, but also with your character. Matriculating out of Topeka and going out, seeing the world, making your stars, and coming back. That says a lot about your character as well, to have that servant's heart. All that said, you mentioned that you all take some road trips for the legislators, to the legislators' areas. I would really like for you to reach out to us in the South Central delegation when you come down to the Wichita area. Would love to get my competency up on what you're doing as well. So if there's an opportunity for us to join with you, please make us available.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Definitely will reach out to you. We'd love to sort of host sessions together so then we can listen to the community together. And I extend that invitation to all of you as well.
Doctor, on the same note, we all know early detection matters a lot when it comes to cancer, and it looks like you guys do a great job of getting out and helping early detection. Is there a place we can send our constituents so they know when you're doing the screenings?
Yes.
So we can get them out?
Absolutely. What I will do is I will send an email to you after the session, after today. We'll give you information on that. And also, we would love to partner with you. If you think that the cancer screening event will be helpful to your community, we would love to try to make that happen.
Oh, that's great news. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Looks like next up we've got presentation on the state of the hospitality industry. Adam Mills. Welcome back, sir. Always good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Good to be here. 1995 alum, Rock Chalk. Slides, please. Okay. Said he wasn't given any.
I think you said something that offended everybody.
Okay. Quick poll. Who's eating out this week? I've eaten out this week. More than once? Twice? 3 times? Maybe? Okay. We love legislators and legislators love us. Thank you for my presentation. No, I don't know whether to, if they don't have the material.
They're on the S drive, and we can email that over to Lance maybe. So
I don't have my presentation printed either.
I do.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. Did you send it? Did you send it? Okay, go ahead and send it to Lance.
It doesn't exactly have the same pop, but I'll do my best here to kind of walk through.
He's going to have it any minute, any second here. So.
Oh, okay, great. Should I just stretch?
You can hold. You want to hold, and we'll go ahead with the hearing first, and then you can come back.
Sure.
Okay. Let's do
Whatever
that.
pleases you.
There's a lot of material there, sir. All right, so we're going to proceed to the hearing first, and then it would probably be a short hearing, and we'll come back to the Restaurant Association, Hospitality Association, so that we can do it properly. My apologies. We're going to open the hearing on HB 2483, and we're going to get a briefing from the revisers. Reviser Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. I have a memorandum that's on your S drive as well. So the bill before you, HB 2483, it removes three statutory mandates for three recurring audits by post audit: the 911 system, the Kansas Public Employee Retirement System, and certain economic development programs. Section 1 of the bill amends the statute within the Kansas 911 Act that requires post audit or a private audit firm selected by the Legislative Post Audit Committee to audit the 911 system every 5 years. This audit is supposed to address three issues. One, whether funds received by the public safety answering points operated by a city or county are being used properly. Two, whether the money from fees collected pursuant to the act, the 911 fees, are sufficient. And three, the status of the 911 service implementation. The costs of the audit are to be reimbursed from the 911 Operations Fund, which is funded by 911 fees. The reports are to be provided to the 911 Coordinating Council, the local collection point administrator, the House Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications, and the Senate Committee on Utilities. The bill also strikes some old language that required an audit of the 911 Coordinating Council. To accomplish the discontinuation of the other two recurring audits that the bill addresses, CAPERS and the Economic Development Incentive Programs, the bill simply repeals two statutes, KSA 461136 and 461137. I've included those statutes in my bill brief if you want to take a look at them. 461136 post audit has to do a performance audit of the system or management of CAPERS at least once every 3 years. The Legislative Post Audit Committee is to consider recommendations and requests with respect to the audits from the Joint Committee on Pensions, Investments, and Benefits, as well as any other committee or member of the legislature. KSA 461137, enacted in 2019, requires post audit to review, analyze, and evaluate economic development programs, and those are programs as defined in KSA 2023 sub 74 5226, and I've attached the definition that includes the programs in my bill brief. And those programs are selected by the Legislative Post Audit Committee, which is to develop a schedule subject to appropriations and with some discretion to allow for resources and time available to the post auditor, such that all economic development incentive programs are reviewed every 3 years. New programs are to be reviewed the year after the program commences and then every 3 years thereafter. The audits are to address certain factors that are specified in the statute. Those factors include an estimate of the economic and fiscal impact of the program, a comparison with other economic development strategies with similar goals, an assessment of the design and administration of the program, whether it's achieving the legislator's goals, a return on investment calculation, and an analysis of opportunity costs. Information from the audits are also to be shared with the Secretary of Commerce for purposes of publication on the Secretary's database for economic development programs. If enacted, this bill would become effective July 1st, 2024. There is a fiscal note for this bill, which you can take a look at. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? (2483) Representative Williams.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm looking at 2483 and somehow we are not seeing the economic incentives portion. We're seeing the 911. What line is that on that are being struck?
So the economic data programs and the CAPERS audits, the statutes are repealed by the bill.
Okay, that's section 2 and 3.
No, they're just, yeah, section 2, right. Section 2 repeals 461136 and 461137. So that's how the discontinuation of the recurring audits for those types of audits, the economic development programs and the CAPERS, are accomplished by just repealing those statutes.
Okay, thank you. I'll definitely bring an amendment for that. Thank you.
Any other questions for the reviser? Representative Bergeron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if someone, I assume this information is important to some entities. If we ever got into a position where this information was needed, is there a way to get at it?
Yes, post audit could be requested, or the legislative post audit committee could be requested to, do an audit. And I think it would be subject to their discretion, but they could have post audit do an audit on an ad hoc basis.
Yeah, so committee, the purpose of this bill was that in legislative post audit, we get audit requests all the time and they conglomerate through the year. And each year we get to choose which, the audit committee chooses which audits they want to choose to focus on. And the statute, the audits that are demanded in statute take up a tremendous amount of time. And so therefore we can't really focus our auditors on the things that are most important to the legislature. This does not keep us from auditing anything in the Department of Commerce or the 911 system. It just removes the automatic audits that are somewhat boring for the most part, that reoccur automatically, and we don't really receive a lot of information because they're not as targeted as we'd like to be because they're in statute. So if we wanted to audit certain programs, we would choose to audit them in a different way or a better way. And that's all this is meant to do.
Yes, Chairman. What the bill does is just remove those the statutory requirements that these audits recur on a regular basis. They have to be done under statute, and then the bill gets rid of that requirements.
Right. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I had to step out for a second, but just for information of the committee, there will be a bill forthcoming here probably next week that I myself and I won't say the name of the Democratic colleague that probably will be co-signing with me, but that will be moving the 911 coordinating council to a fee-funded state agency, which would then negate the reasoning for the 5-year audit that we did every year. I would be a little, I serve on that 911 coordinating council. I would be a little bit hesitant to totally get rid of the audit if we don't move it to a state agency, because that is one of the only real look backs that we have as far as a legislature to really look at what they're doing. But I think at this point it's probably it's probably okay, because I'm hoping this other bill will go forward.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the audit that came out recently, but there's not a lot of useful information in it, and it seems like we spent a lot of money on that.
Right, and the money comes out of the 911 fee fund. The audit is useful though within the coordinating council in kind of some of the inner workings of maybe how they need to go forward. But again, I think that if if what happens is what we envision, hopefully will happen, I think a lot of that will be negated. So I'm not sure that it is needed.
Right. Any other questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you, sir. I'm not showing any proponents to the bill or opponents to the bill, and I'm sure the committee will hash that out when we work the bill. We do have a neutral testimony from Chris Clark, Legislative Post Audit. Welcome to Commerce Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For those I don't know, my name is Chris Clark. I'm the Director of Legislative Post Audit. So this bill impacts the workload on my agency or the audits that are selected. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and tell you a little bit about Post Audit for those of you who aren't familiar with us, and to give you a little bit of insight on the bill. That was an excellent summary, so that negates a lot of my testimony. I won't summarize the bill again. But just for those of you that I haven't worked with yet, Post Audit was created in 1971. We are nonpartisan. We are a legislative staff agency. We work for you all. Our mission is to inform you by providing accurate, unbiased information through our audit reports. We focus on 3 core areas: oversight, insight, and foresight. We help the legislature with oversight of state government by evaluating whether agencies are following laws, achieving intended results, and operating efficiently. We also help legislators develop a better understanding of state government by providing insight into how agencies and programs actually work. And finally, in some cases, we provide legislators with foresight by predicting how changing current government structures and systems might impact state costs and program outcomes. As a staff agency, we do report to the Legislative Post Audit Committee. It is a 10-member bipartisan committee. Under the Legislative Post Audit Act, you all, as individual legislators, legislative committees, or the governor can request an audit. Those requests go through the Legislative Post Audit Committee, who then selects the topics and assigns our audit work. We typically receive more requests for audits than we have capacity for. Most of the audits we conduct are performance audits, and these compare how a state agency or program is currently working to how it should be operating. We also conduct IT security audits, which assess security controls at agencies and school districts throughout the state. So you have a summary of the bill. I just wanted to give you maybe a few more points of consideration. As far as the 911 system audit that is required by law, it's been in the law originated in 2011. It requires that we audit the implementation of the 911 system every 5 years. The audit also covers fee levels and proper use of monies. We did just do an audit in 2023. It was just released last fall, and the system is essentially implemented. So at least that part of the law is no longer relevant. Any future 911 issues going forward regarding the use of monies could certainly be requested through an ad hoc audit. As far as capers, this one's been on the books since 1992, that we have to do an audit of capers every 3 years. Happy to do it. If you want us to keep doing that, that's great. But it does take a topic away from the committee when it comes time to select audits. This year, we were due for our capers audit. The committee didn't have a whole lot of interest, but they had to pick a capers audit because by statute, we have to do one every 3 years. And finally, on the economic development, it is a broad definition that's in statute of economic development incentives. Currently, we have 60 or more programs on the list. We're supposed to evaluate all of them on a recurring 3-year cycle. It's just a lot of work. We're in Department of Commerce business year-round. So just something, food for thought. If that's the direction you want us to keep going, we certainly will. But just we wanted to bring it to your attention. The bill also would remove the requirement for LPA to evaluate new incentives 1 year after implementation. That's just not long enough to see much activity. So those evaluations are pretty thin, basically. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the director? Representative Dodson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. When you do an audit, when you prepare for it, or is your approach to the audit dictated by a template? Is it in order to measure the organization against its stated criteria and goals? Or does somebody else provide the specifics on what they want you to look for?
Again, our proposals stem from legislator concerns. So each audit is unique, and whatever particular, it could be a program, it could be a specific aspect, it could be a policy. So each audit is unique, but we work with the legislator to work out their concerns and develop an audit. And then that goes before the Legislative Post-Audit Committee, and they look at all the proposals, and then they decide which ones they direct us to do.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And when they do that, the committee is limited by capacity. And could you give the Commerce Committee an idea of what an average audit takes as far as manpower and number of hours?
A typical audit, I mean, they all vary, but a typical audit is we assign three staff, and they take about 4 months.
Representative Osmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can, I'd like to focus on capers and ask a couple of questions. Sorry. I wanted to know what the average cost is for capers as an audit as compared to what you just described as the normal average cost of an audit.
As far as costs, we're a state agency, so we receive an appropriation. So there is no out-of-pocket cost to capers or to any entity that we audit. Sure. It's just part of our workload. Other than that, we're wrapping one up now as we speak, and it was a standard 3-person. It was a standard audit.
Okay. So I saw that there's going to be a report coming out in February. Is that correct? February of 2024.
On capers?
Yes.
Yes, that's our goal.
Okay. As I look at the Division of Post Audit's website, I see that the last actual report was from 2020. The last audit was from 2016. Is that correct? Or is there something else that I was missing on that?
As far as timing of release, the audit that we're issuing in February of 24 was authorized in 2023. So that's the 3-year cycle. It takes us a while to do them. Sometimes they roll over to the next calendar year.
Okay. And is the reason that this was brought forward just a manpower consideration, or because as I read, you mentioned that it came into effect in 1992. I saw that there was a law update from 2018, if I'm reading the law correctly, and that from SB 260 was passed unanimously by the House and the Senate. So I'm trying to figure out, was there something that's occurred in the last 5 years that necessitated this legislation?
No, not really. Just it came time to pick topics this past year. A couple of the slots were already taken because of these statutory requirements. So it just got the conversation going.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
No other questions. Thank you.
Representative Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you said how much a standard audit is. I've been to the selection process once when I had an audit in front, and so it was a brand new process for me to learn. If I can remember correctly, like for instance, when I went, the elections audit at that time was going to take up 2 slots because of how many hours. So could you let us know like how many slots are available, but sometimes they are maybe a really big audit or kind of go down that route?
Right. That's why it varies. And so it's hard to say. I did look the last couple of years, typically for a Legislative Post-Audit Committee, throughout the session. Please contact me if you have any concerns and we'll develop a proposal. But the committee takes up the list of proposals in April. So I looked at the last couple of April meetings to see how many proposals there were and how many slots the committee could authorize. So the proposals varied from 13 to 20 per year. And the number that the committee could pick was roughly 6 per year. There are other audits that we do that are not part of that. The IT security audits are not part of that. The economic development is not part of that. And then we have some little limited scope audits that are not part of that.
Okay, so just so I understand, so these audits are not part of your 6 slots?
The Capers one is. The economic development one is not, but it takes a whole team out of consideration.
Okay, and then for Capers, is it just you have to audit Capers in general, or can they pick any topic in Capers they want to have, but it just has to be Capers in general has to be audited?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so the Capers audit is one of the least specific audits that has to be done, but there's only 6 or 7 slots usually available to choose from because the system is bogged down by these automatic audits. The Capers one is one that we actually choose as one of the 6. Any other questions on how that all works? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That last statement, I thought I was following along, and then the last statement confused me. The Capers one is one that you choose, except that this bill is trying to remove the statutory requirement. Help me out here.
So the Capers one is one that we have to choose, and it's part of the 6 slots that are available. The other mandatory audits on here are just happening behind the scenes because they're automatic, and we don't have any say over what the audit looks like. They just happen. The Capers one is we have to audit Capers every 3 years, but we get to choose how we audit Capers every 3 years. And so that is something the committee gets to choose an audit to do for Capers, and that counts as one of the 6 that we were able to choose this year.
All right, if I could continue, the effect of this bill then would be what in that scenario?
In that scenario, we would still be able to choose a Capers if we would want to, but we don't have to. This year we had to, and there was nothing of interest. As Representative Osmond said, the one we chose, thing's only been around for a few years, but it would, instead of being able to choose 6, we might be able to choose 9 or 10 or 11 of the 20 that are out there, because
Capers is only $26 billion. I mean,
Right,
I
right.
can see why we wouldn't want to necessarily pay attention to that.
Totes. Any other questions? Seeing none. I can see this is going to be an interesting hearing, or when we work this, it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you very much for coming today. Okay, do we have the presentation for the Restaurant Association queued up? We do. All right, great. I guess we can skip the eat out poll.
Is that good? Okay. One more great topic, cancer, then audits. Now I'm up. So really good. If we could queue up the presentation, that'd be great this time around. So thank you very much. My name is Adam Mills. I'm president and CEO of the Kansas Restaurant and Hospitality Association. For the group, I also serve on the National Restaurant Association and the executive committee of the National Restaurant Association. If you would advance the slide. I'm pleased to be here presenting to you guys today, and want to first of all thank you for all the work that you've done, that you did to get us through 20 and 21, a very difficult time. 22 was a bounce back year, and 23 was a dip, quite honestly. So we bounced back in 22. You're going to see some data here that shows some of the dip in 23, but we're coming back out of it. So let's see where we go from here. Next slide. There are about 1 million restaurant and food service establishments in the United States, and there are about 4,500 in Kansas. There are also about 91,000 lodging properties and 744 in Kansas. And both those numbers we feel like hopefully are going to start to rise again. So next slide. Employment. Everybody wants to talk about jobs. We've bellyached about people to do work. We've all tried to solve the problem of jobs in Kansas. It's good to know that there are about 128,000 restaurant jobs in Kansas and about 57,000 lodging jobs in Kansas. The bad news is that's down about 10%. Still down about 10%. So, but we are on the recovery trend, and you'll see that in the next slide. Next slide, please. Nationally, you see the dip there in January, February of 2020. That's when the pandemic hit. And then we've slowly been climbing back out of that hole. In December of 2023, we finally got back to where we were pre-pandemic from an employment standpoint. Next slide. Outlook. So here's the good news, guys. 88% of employers in our industry feel it's likely they will be hiring in the next 6 to 12 months. So 88%, that's a wonderful number. 62% very likely to be hiring. So good to see that. Hopefully we've got the people. Next slide, please. Sales. So everybody knows that we're a huge industry economic driver in our communities. $6.1 billion in Kansas in the restaurant industry, $1.1 billion in the lodging, which translates on the next slide. Consumer spending. So these slides go back to, I believe, January of 2021. The print is very, very small. I apologize for that. But even if changed for inflation, you can see that the trend is up and moving in the right direction, and we're back. So feeling very good going into 2024 that our revenue is back. Next slide, please. Sales tax collection. So what does that mean for the state? If we're doing that much business in the state, what does that mean? It means we're collecting about $580 million in revenue for the state of Kansas. So vital in our role for the state, both in employment and tax collection. Next slide, please. Restaurant neighbor, most people know about our philanthropy, and I'd like to highlight this. One of my, in fact, my board chair this year is a guy named Kevin Timmons from Nick and Jake's, Kansas City. He's been before this committee before. Our industry gives back. It's crazy how much we give back, considering the low margins that exist. But Kevin gives back in a whole nother way, and I wanted to let you guys know you have a Kansan who was a national philanthropy award winner in our industry. So he won the Restaurant Neighbor Award in 2020, right before the pandemic, for his good work that he does in his community in Overland Park. So you think about 1 million restaurant and food service establishments across the country that could be eligible for this award. And our very own Kansan, Kevin Timmons, won that award. We're very proud of that. Next slide, please. We also have an educational foundation that not only works with high schools, but also to improve our workforce. And one of the key components of that is teaching people how to properly handle food. So a lot of things that we take for granted. When you go in a restaurant, you don't get sick. We don't take it for granted. We're training people from the time they enter our high schools how to properly handle that food and to train them and certify them. Next slide, please. Our Pro Start program is intended to get people on a career path to our industry. As you see the industry need, the 128,000 and growing workers in the state of Kansas, we need an available workforce that can pick up and do the work. We work with 36 high schools across the state, 3,800 high school students. We placed chefs in kitchens in some of the most notable restaurants across the country, right out of the state of Kansas. We're very excited about that. We want to see that continue to grow. It's a real career path that we have in our industry. Next slide. Now, I'm not an economist, And I did not stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night. So, but I do read a lot and get a lot of education, and I do my very best to translate these slides for you. But please keep in mind, if you try to really dig into the fact of the matter on this, I didn't even wear glasses today. So we're going to move into these slides. Restaurant openings and closings. So you see that peak there on February of 2020. We were at about 838,000 restaurants in the country. And you go to the end of the graph and you see 815,000. So somewhere through that period of time, we've lost about 23,000 restaurants. 23,000 people's dreams were crushed. Lost, in most cases, everything they had during that period of time. But the good news is, on you see the red and the green line that are following there, we're finally at a point over the course of the last year that there are more restaurant openings than closings. So we're starting to make gains on that loss. So good things to come. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where, and I asked Scott if it was okay if I said this. This slide here is kind of where feelings become facts, right? Because we polled our members and we said, hey, how do you feel about how things are going in the business? And it was good to see that 16%, an increase of 16% of people feel foot traffic is increasing. So it's very important considering where we've been and where things were as a society, kind of living out of our homes. Now we're starting to see people back and re-entering our restaurants. Feels really good. Next slide, please. Challenges. The rising cost of food, number one. I think that's a challenge for people, not just restaurants, but certainly for restaurants. And you're going to see in the following slides that kind of play itself out. Rising cost of food and rising cost of labor and inflation. Big drains on the restaurant industry because we are a low profit margin business, somewhere around $5,000 to $6,000 of profit per employee. So you compare that with other industries, maybe retailers like Walmart or Target, they're looking at somewhere around $50,000 of profit per employee. We're out there competing in the margins at $5,000 to $6,000 a profit per employee. Very difficult business to make money at. Next slide, please. So what's the ideal sales mix? You guys are probably seeing a lot of things on delivery, Grubhub, using different applications. And that's all true. And those are all important pieces because you don't want to say no to any business, right? If you can do revenue, you want to do revenue. It's important. But it's interesting to see here, we still get more telephone orders, 10%, than we're getting from Grubhub, DoorDash, and some of those apps. Pretty interesting stuff, right? Next slide, please. So inflation, we've all felt it. We all see it. Last year, we experienced really high inflation rates, 8% overall, 10 to 11% in food. And we're trying to make that, okay? So trying to make sure that people are still coming into our restaurants and spending their dollars. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the consumer price index of how things have changed in restaurants and in grocery stores. So you've kind of see there, the good news is grocery stores are kind of leveled off there. They're the red line on the bottom. But food away from home has continued to increase. So the larger that gap becomes, the harder it is for us to win, right? Everybody knows that eating out and eating in restaurants is not only essential in their daily life. For some, it's the only option. I know when we talked about the food sales tax not too long ago, one of the points we tried to make is food, no matter where it's consumed. And for some communities, they don't have a grocery store. So if you've got someone that lives in, example, Lebo, Kansas, and they work in Emporia, Kansas, and they're getting up to go get breakfast on their way out, and they didn't have a chance to go to the grocery store to get that tax-free item, they're now eating maybe a restaurant option or maybe a Casey's General Store option, but it's ready to eat food and it's not getting the tax advantage. So just something to think about. Next slide, please. Producer price index. So this is probably a good sign for us, for everyone. the number's coming down. It's going in the right direction, not the wrong direction. So if the producers are spending less money to make the product, then maybe we can get it at a better price as we move forward. Next slide, please. Consumer food expenditures. So this one really set me back for a minute. So you look back to 2012 and you look at the cost to eat, the cost of food, a little under $7,000 10 years ago. And look where we're at today, approaching $10,000 to eat. So that's a pretty big gain over the last few years. And if you'll notice, again, the food away from home is continuing to curl up at a higher rate. And that's because of that rising food cost, food availability from the suppliers and the things that we sell, and also the cost of labor continues to increase. Next slide, please. So SNAP participation rate, I wasn't 100% sure how relevant it was, but we decided to put it in there. You'll see that there are 41 million people on SNAP. Where are those 41 million people spending their SNAP dollars? At the grocery store. They're not spending them at restaurants, right? So again, another disparity. They're getting the tax advantage. They're getting the additional government dollars. So we're kind of in the mix trying to make all that matter to us. So next slide, please. And this is kind of where we'll finish today. Consumer confidence. So consumer confidence prior to the pandemic, high, 98.4%. Since the pandemic, it's obviously tanked. And now we're seeing a small bump from 59 to 65.3, but we're a long way from being where we need to be. So hopefully we can continue that trend, keep things moving in the right direction, eating out in restaurants, enjoying our friends and our family, having some affordable luxury, and enjoying our time. And I think there's one more slide, and it's probably just a thank you. So I want to tell the whole committee thank you for your time. I've really appreciated the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions? Representative Blue?
Thank you. Real quick. Two questions. One, are restaurants taxed when they purchase their food from Benny Keith and from Cisco and everything?
No, in Kansas, the end user pays sales tax.
Okay.
So those are sales tax exempt purchases. When we buy them, then we collect from our guests all the taxes.
Okay. And the second question, and Scott and I were talking about this yesterday, you're seeing a lot more fast food places offering tips or putting the tip item in there. Like I think of Subway, for instance. Is it
artist?
Yes. My question is, and the talk behind it on some podcasts have been, if you are now tipping your employees, or if your employees can receive a tip, then the owner can then pay less in wages because they're a tip employee now instead of minimum wage. Could you kind of address that?
I don't know that I understand the question. I mean, I get what you're saying. I don't know that I agree with the logic. I think that you build in your cost of goods sold, and wages are certainly a part of that puzzle. So what you're paying people has to do with what you're able to pay them from kind of the net of all of that. And I don't know that necessarily it aids in the employer's decision. It may aid the employee and how much they can earn. And I know both of my daughters work in the industry, and both of them enjoy getting their tips for a job well done. But I don't know that I can agree with the logic that it aids the employer in some way in paying less.
Thank you.
Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Hey, I was kind of going back to your slide here where you said your operators' ideal sales mix for 2024. That's the graph that has the in-person, the digital apps, third-party telephone orders on it. Mm-hmm. Is this your goal for 2024, or is this a snapshot of 2023?
I think that's just inferring some information as a whole, what you would like to see from your mix of revenue. So when any of those particular numbers get out of whack, it probably isn't a good sign, or maybe a thing that you need to consider in your pricing. But all of that revenue has a different expense next to it. So there's cost to do. For instance, you all know that when you buy from DoorDash, not only is DoorDash getting a piece of that, the driver's getting a piece of that, and you're paying a piece of that too as a restaurant. So there's an increased cost and probably a lower profitability on that sale. So I think that's what that's about, is trying to figure out what an ideal mix is for your particular establishment. And that could be different from location to location, concept to concept. But good question. That's a tough one. And also, I did say I'm not an economist, and that's part of my education packet. But thank you very much for the question.
Absolutely, absolutely. I
Yeah.
was just trying to figure out, because actually I was kind of surprised by some of the numbers on there. If this was kind of an ideal mix, actually it looks like it would be a pretty good ideal mix. I would definitely think that would look great. I just kind of curious if that kind of matches up to the reality of where the majority of the restaurants are that would fall into this category.
You know, I don't know. That's a good question. Statistically, it probably is, but I think individually it may be different from location to location. So good question.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. Happy to help with presentation stuff in whatever way. So some of my questions address workforce issues and are kind of similar to what the previous representative from Great Bend was touching on. So Kansas still has a tipped wage of, and I don't know if a lot of you are widely aware of this, but it is $2.13 an hour, which is very low. And so I don't know what kind of workforce issues most restaurants are dealing with. And also just looking to when it comes to the way that employees are or are not paid when it comes to tips, especially those through credit cards. Anything that you can speak to on that? And after that, I do have one more question, Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge.
Okay, good question. So your first question is about $2.13 an hour, which, so the first thing that I hope the room understands is that that is the credited wage. So every employer in the state of Kansas has to guarantee minimum wage, which is $7.25 in the state of Kansas. Meaning, if they don't make enough tips to get to $7.25, the employer has to subsidize that all the way to the number after tips. So most servers make somewhere between $25 and $30 an hour. They're some of the highest paid people in the restaurant. They're some of the most coveted jobs in a restaurant. I know that both of my daughters serve. Both of them, well, in fact, my daughter came home 2 days ago. I'm very excited to have earned $50 an hour serving for that day. So that would be the first thing. It's really a credit. It's a tax credit, if you will, for small business. And a lot of restaurants couldn't make it without that. And your other question?
My other question has to do with healthcare coverage, in particular for restaurant workers. So I know that a lot of them are mostly part-time. I myself spent time working 3 restaurant jobs at once, none of which gave me healthcare at all, despite the fact that I was a hardworking, able-bodied person. So can we speak a little bit more about healthcare coverage for employees, in particular because restaurant work is hard work. You're on your feet a lot. You're walking food, unless you have those robots that deliver, but in any case, so talk to me a little bit more about that, because I think that our restaurant workers are some of the least insured. And I would think that this would be an issue for recruitment in your industry.
It's a huge issue for all Kansas businesses. Cost of healthcare is ridiculous. We were just having this discussion. I can't remember a year recently where my staff's health insurance, and we're an association office, we're not a restaurant, but I can't remember a year where our health insurance costs didn't increase at minimum 8%. It's a huge, huge expense for all Kansas businesses. The first thing you addressed was part-time workers. I don't know too many businesses, period, that provide healthcare insurance to part-time workers. So, that is an issue. One of the things we've done as an association is we've created a healthcare platform where people can get not insurance, but access to healthcare for $9 a month. I think that our industry is full of innovation trying to find this. I know lots of restaurant owners who don't have healthcare because it's so expensive. I just looked, my cost, I wasn't anticipating this question, but I looked because I care. I've been in the insurance business since 1997. So a small part of our association is handling insurance for our members. But I've been in the business since 1997. And I look at my health insurance and really get angry because my family of 5 is $2,800 per month with a maximum out of pocket of $13,000. Do the math. That's not very affordable for anybody. So it is a concern. It's a problem we need to solve. And I don't have the answer, but hopefully someone in this building or someone out there does. We just heard from KU Cancer talking about the enormous cost to do what they need to do. And I don't know if you guys saw the Reuters article, but there is a massive increase in bankruptcy in 2023. And among those hardest hit were healthcare provider companies.
I
So,
agree. I do
all the
have
way
the
through.
answer,
So,
actually. So
yeah.
the answer, it rhymes with Medicaid expansion. So we'll look at that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Representative Williams.
Which?
Representative Penn.
Okay, you, all right, cool. In the interest of time, we'll make it simple for you. Thanks for being here today. Are there any regulations that you can think of, you or your team, here in the state of Kansas that could help free up across the industry, across the state of Kansas, free you up to prosper a little bit more, or that we could also go engage for you on the federal level, such as the Affordable Care Act that seems to be crippling your businesses? If you don't have any answers with that off the top right now, feel free to email them over to us as well.
I think she did, and I didn't address it, and I apologize, Representative Clayton. She did address credit card fees. Credit card fees are a huge problem. So it's number 3 on the P&L: food cost, labor cost, credit card fees. I believe we're sitting here at about 92 or 93% of all transactions are done with credit cards. And you would think in this world with all this volume of credit cards being used that the fees should be going down, but they're not. The fees are going up. Nationally, we have a bill called the CCCA. Senator Moran is behind it. It's the Credit Card Competition Act, creates some competition in the space. It's a huge problem, huge problem. So you would think, right, just for fun, number 3 would not be credit card fees. It would be like rent or building expense or maintenance or something along those lines, or utilities. Gosh, we consume a lot of utilities, but it's credit card fees. And we introduced the bill, Visa, MasterCard answer by raising their fees. So yeah, that's a huge thing. So any help in that area, I think there was a dust up in Kansas City because there was a restaurant group who's not a member of mine, so I will not take credit for it nor blame. It is legal to charge back the server the proportionate cost of the credit card. So if you have a $50 check and a $100 tip, you're running $150, the fees are 4%, 3%, you can charge back the server on their $100 tip, the proportionate cost of that credit card fee. That's legal to do. I know very few people that are doing it. Maybe to address her point, which is it's very hard to get good people working in our industry. The last thing we want to do is make the people that are doing a great job angry. So anyway, that's just food for thought. I feel like I've talked a lot and you guys are really busy. So any other questions that I can help you with?
I still have 9 people on the list, so
Okay.
I'm not seeing any other questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thanks.
Okay, committee, we're going to adjourn here. No meeting tomorrow. We do have a meeting Monday. Stay tuned. It's going to be another exciting week in the Commerce Committee.